Welcome to the Pardon My Art podcast with me, your host, Oscar Castro. This show is all about the artist. Our podcast features creatives doing amazing things in the art world and across a wide range of artistic mediums to help inspire other artists to reach their full creative potential. Today's guest is Bernard Collins. Bernard is a proud South Philadelphia native who now resides in my hometown of Lawnside, New Jersey, a historic place in South Jersey connected to the Underground Railroad that became the only antebellum black community in New Jersey founded and incorporated by black folk prior to desegregation in the United States. And it is important to note this as Lawnside was once well known for the kind of culture that Bernard honors through his creative energy. Bernard is a visual artist, a poet, a lyricist, a muralist, and educator who has shared his art across New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and the world. A figurative artist, I am always drawn in by Bernard's portrait work, which to me is beyond amazing as his use of color and his command of composition are masterful. Bernard has this to say about his fine art. My paintings are a reflection of my desire to understand the human body and soul. As an African American artist, I have had to balance my educational background, which has been firmly grounded in European traditional techniques such as glazing, underpainting, etc., and my desire to capture the liveliness and innovativeness that is present in African American culture. Bernard and I have been friends and contemporaries for close to 30 years now, and I consider him one of the greatest creatives of our generation. Let's jump into the conversation. So welcome to the Pardon My Art podcast, Brother Bernard. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you as well. Yes.
Well, thank you for making the time to have this conversation. We've known each other for close to 30 years, I think now.
Close to 30 years.
Yeah, my oldest is 25, so it's been a few years before that, I'm sure. So,
and it's always been a pleasure, man. I gotta say this, and I say it from the heart, man. Your spirit as a poet, as a visual artist, and just as a person, has always been encouraging to me. You know, I can't say that enough, man. It's like wow. It's like in the good people you learn to treasure, because you realize how temporary your time is, and it's the food from which you create good art. Is those interactions that you have. At least for me, it's like wow, man. It motivates me to do good stuff and to create good stuff.
Well, that's the main reason why I created this podcast, to be able to have conversations with people like you. You are an inspiring force for me as well. I know you inspire many others, and you've been in the world of education as well as creating your own art, right? So I know that there's a lot of stuff that people can learn from just hearing you talk about what you do. So let me start by asking you a fundamental question, which is, what do you do? What is your art form? I know, but I want you to tell the audience.
Well, I mean, my education, I have my master's degree in painting, and I wound up teaching a lot of watercolor, portrait, watercolor drawing, watercolor painting, and drawing classes. I've been at Fleischer Art Memorial since 2006, so that's kind of a long time. I've also worked as a muralist. I just completed a private mural for a good friend of ours, who it's really interesting because the mural itself came together in like one day. One day. Um, but I was explaining to a friend of mine, it's the culmination of all those years of experience as a painter that allows you to work in that way. So I share my information. I share the information I know about visual arts and poetry. I do spoken word. I've been involved with spoken word. I would say officially since about 1988. Because 1988, I had my little. I started off as a rapper, MC, right? And it's around that time. It was a small private gathering with some Philly poets from the seeds of what would be the 1990s poetry scene in Philly. And one person that was there was Tariq Trotter. aka Black Thought. And it was the first time I was doing stuff straight off the book. And I was doing a poem called I think it was called the Devil in the Dozens or something like that. It was a funny poem. And he was like, "Man, you should just go up there and do that." And the rest is history. I started going and playing doing poetry. Yeah,
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, and I think that's how we first met was
yeah,
hanging out at the October Gallery and then being a part of that '90s poetry crowd crew that was being
right, right.
spawned there. I mean, people like Rich Medina, super famous DJ now,
Hmm.
model Jill Scott, so many others, a lot of musicians too that came in there. I think that was the selling point for me was that there were different types of poetry opportunities to get your poetry on and do speaking kind of stuff, but very few of them, if any, beyond what was happening at the October Gallery, actually had musicians that were backing up the poets. And that was to me that was so much fun, and to see folks like you get up there and be lyrical behind a bassist and a drummer and our friend Jafar Barron,
Yep.
doing his horn thing. Or Tim Motzer might have been sitting in with his guitar, or Timmy Tanzania, just like so many amazing people blew through there.
People that have gone on and do international things, and Philadelphia. It was interesting because I wound up hosting at a place called South Street Blues. And I did that with another fellow poet, Stephanie Renee, who's also a vocalist. And and it was very interesting because a lot of the Philadelphia music scene that worked with us as poets and comedians and stuff that used to also come through because it was like this overlay between we were all looking for an opportunity. So on the one hand you had like singers that were trying to look just for an excuse. I need an excuse to go off, right? So you see like the Roots, and stuff like the Black Lily, but then you would also have like comedians like Kevin Hart. You would see them, and they would somehow wind up interacting acting with you, because we were all looking for an opportunity to just be heard and be seen. In some ways, I wish we would have claimed it a little harder, you know, like for history's sake, but I mean, it is what it is.
Hmm. So let me ask you a question. Since you are to me like one of the most talented painters and draft people I know, and you do poetry and you do music, do you have a favorite medium that you prefer over any others, or one that you feel like this is where I'm great at, and these other things are I'm good at, and I love doing them, but this is the thing that I want to be known as for
Right.
time immemorial, or maybe all of them. Maybe you want to be like Paul Robeson and be great at everything.
Well, I mean, you know what? That's an interesting question that you asked because for me, it's the quantifying which one is my favorite is like picking a favorite child. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes the energy inside it moves like I get inspired to paint. Sometimes I'm inspired to write poetry. Sometimes I'll start a painting and then I realize that I need to sort of work it out with words. You know, so for me it's just being creative in general, but the discipline I have in painting is different in that I went to school for it. I got the master's degree, I got the bachelor's degree. I got my bachelor's degree in painting 1998 and my master's degree in 2003, and that affords you a different kind of knowledge, right? Not necessarily better, but different. Like I was talking to Ozzy Jones, who's a director out of Philly, and a very good musician, and so many other things. And he was talking. We were talking about school, the whole concept of education, because at this point the conversation seems to be wrapped around the financial this and that of it. Like financially it costs this and that, but there is something about coming together for the purpose of learning specific information. It's something about that is special. It puts you in a you become part of like almost like a fraternity of knowledge. You know, like people who would go to like people who go to seminary, they share they have a shared experience, or people in the military, for people who are veterans, or people who work in who are say conscientious objectors who work in the Peace Corps. you know you share this experience, and that experience is special. The only problem in the United States is we've found a way to charge people to the you know incredibly for it, but it's so worth it to have, because there are things I couldn't learn on my own as a painter. Like, there are techniques I've learned that I had to get it from a source that would protect the information. Or now, in that same information is when I'm teaching, I give it to people. You know what I mean? Yeah, I give it to people. You want to learn how to paint? You want to learn how to draw? Because there's another factor that comes with it, is the dedication and practice that comes with what you do with the information. You know what I mean? So once you crack that code, then you'll be able to do anything. So I love painting. I have a different kind of knowledge of painting. Poetry was always my. I would consider that secondary. So now I've answered the question. Poetry, I would consider that secondary, only because I intentionally wanted to learn through it experientially, and I wasn't interested in learning, like sitting down in a whole bunch of classes to figure out how to do it. I wanted to pull that from my soul, just like Ella Fitzgerald um, was the master at scatting, because she scattered, you know. So she invented her own way.
So influences wise, like I like to ask people who are naturally gifted, uh, do where else do you derive your sort of inspiration from, if not yourself, right? So I'm thinking, as a person who considers myself an artist in a variety of forms, um, if I'm thinking about poetry, I'm thinking about people like Nika Giovanni. I'm thinking about Sonia Sanchez that have inspired me to be a better poet. Uh, um, graphic art, uh, painting. I have my list of people who I would ideally like to be like, or who have taught me along the way. Who are your like most favorite inspirers in your world?
My inspiration. Oh wow. Um, Years ago, when I was in South Philly, I grew up in South Philly, born and raised,
Mm.
and proud to be a South Philly dude. Um, and that's interesting now that I'm in Lawnside, right?
Right.
Um, uh,
It's still
uh,
South Philly though. It's south of Philly, so
yeah, a lot in South Philly out
it's
here.
Philly.
Um, there's a brother who created a comic book called Brother Man Comics.
Hmm.
And when he created this comic, before he created comics, he had another name that he went by, which was Dave Sims. And he did this mural in South Philly on 20th and Tasker, right? And it was huge. And he did it with a graffiti writer named Lover, right? And Lover's name was Bobby Sabs. And I give that name because, Lover since passed. And the thing I always admired about those two brothers was I always admired the way they Dawood Adewuye is his name now, and because he changed his name and moved to Texas. But I always admired his characters, the way he drew them, and I always admired the originality that Bobby Sabs had when he did his name. When he drew his name, he did it different than any of the other graffiti writers, in my opinion. So, and I said, wow, it's something about being different. So I think that sort of sparked the artistic thing. So fast forward, he had an airbrush store in a gallery, and I was like, wow, let me go check that out. And I always wanted to know how I could be down. How I could be down, right? And in the meantime, I was doing my little characters and drawing my little, like, doing my thing. And I went from, I had my parents had home. I had home training, so they weren't going to let me go out and get arrested like some people I knew over and over and over again for graffiti. So and I so I said, you know what? I'm focused on the characters and focus on drawing in the books. So that's how I started. So I would do the drawings and the books. And a matter of fact, somebody from my high school who went to high school with me on Ninth, he lived down on Ninth Street, and he had one of my old books when I was a kid. And I realized something: teenagers are very horny. They draw craziest, inappropriate things. And when I was a kid, I said, "Oh my god!" I was obsessed with certain things, but it was just me being a teenager. But it still showed that I just loved to draw. All right, so Dave had his thing, and then I found out he went to Tyler at one point, and he didn't finish. So then I said, you know what? I'm gonna go to Tyler, right? And I got into Tyler, and then I worked and worked, and then he had dropped. He wound up not finishing because he went on and did his own thing with Brother Man and all that. But I kept going. I caught the bug, and then from there I went on and got my master's degree. So he was one influence, and then through that I met other artists, learned about other artists, local artists like Richard Watson, James Dupree, um, and started learning about historical artists like Jacob Lawrence and some of the other artists that were here, even Jean Michel Basquiat. Although work is so different than what I do. That spirit, that sort of like out of graffiti into fine art kind of spirit, sort of like stuck with me. You know what I mean? And now, even at this point in the game, which I know how to paint, I know how to draw. That's another big thing. Initially, the drive was I wanted to learn how to draw things that look like other things. Like if I wanted to, you've seen the portrait I did of the great Oscar Castro, right? Right? you know, right. Listen, and I wanted to learn how to do that. I wanted to learn how to draw things that looked like I wanted them to look, and it was about having that control. And even though Basquiat's way is like a little different, I still find inspiration with that. And I find this, it all meshes together to become me. So I'm very inspired. Then I also am inspired by popular media. And that comes out a lot in the poetry. Like um, like for me, I always said, well, you know what? I'm going to create a poem that I think needs to be created. So I'll create a poem about aliens coming to Earth and doing things, or I'll create poetry about a love poem that about someone who's obsessed, or you know what I mean. So I think how Hollywood sort of got stuck into my brain somewhere, and it pours out into the work that I've created, um, and that sort of desire has like spawned some poetry that's somewhat off the main. Like I've never heard anybody else with a werewolf poem. I literally said, you know, I'm gonna create a poem about becoming a werewolf, and then I just did. you know, um, but then on the flip side of things, on the other side of things, I'll go meet I had the pleasure and honor of meeting the last poets on several occasions. I've met Avi Odun and shared poems with him in Harlem, and online because he still does the online thing, and
Mm-hmm.
and whenever you're around a brother like that, or Sonia Sanchez, or you go hear Gil Scott Heron, people who performed in Philly, who we got an opportunity to see with Gil Scott Heron before he passed, um,
Mm-hmm.
or it's a desire. You say, man, I need to look at the world around me, and I need to do some work that's responsive to what's around me. Oh, they eliminate Roe versus Wade. Well, you know what? I could do a poem about that because that's on my mind, and this might be a chance to use poetry as a conscious conversation. You know what I mean? What society should do or shouldn't do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm. There's
I'll admit, because I'm
Go
not going to
ahead.
be perfect at all. I will say this and be
Yeah.
honest that Dolomite, Rudy Ray Moore, was was also one inspiration I had because And when did you see that the Eddie Murphy's take on Dolomite?
I did. That was so fascinating.
It was fascinating. It was like this is a guy. So despite the content of what he was doing, that individual spirit of like determination was amazing to me. It was also the movie was written penned by one of the architects of Ed Wood. The movie
Mm,
Wood, the black and white
right.
movie with Johnny Depp. And it's a similar kind of desire that I can see why they chose him as the script writer for that particular piece because it's that individual, that idea of I'm going to do this no matter what. Like, you know what I mean?
Right. Right. So how do you motivate yourself aside from like having these influences? I watched that movie and I think I took the same thing away from it. Aside from all the other things that I learned about Rudy Ray Moore, the thing I can remember that stuck with me was his determination and his desire to go and do the thing that people were telling him it couldn't be done, right? And
Yeah.
so he was a self motivator in a lot of ways. How do you find your self motivation, and especially as somebody who does different kinds of art, like how do you keep yourself organized and motivated towards starting a project that might come into your consciousness, and then of course getting it through completion? What's your process?
Um. Well, first, it's interesting with poetry. You know, is a little bit different because that's something where I take it on based on inspiration, but I also go based on projects that come up in front of me. I had a chance to work with Homer Jackson in the Philadelphia Jazz Project, and I worked with this. In doing so, I wound up working with the Sunrise Orchestra because they had the Sunrise mixtape project. So being involved with like finding projects like that to work with that would push you a little bit further than you were before have been really inspiring me and inspiring for me in that aspect. Um, Also, like finding a way to sort of do it to live, if that makes any sense, doing it like you know like I do portraits initially. Like some people would not be into like doing portraits, they would just want to do their own work. Of course I create my own work, but I also subsidize that work by doing like commission work for people. I do a wedding portrait. I have a wedding portrait in front of me here, and I have another portrait that I've just been commissioned to do. And those commissions have been great because I always think about it as the painting I'm creating or the artwork I'm creating is building me up for the artwork that I want to create. So each painting becomes a stair step. Each creation becomes a stair step that moves me one step further closer to what the artist I want to become, to the artwork I want to generate. So last week I was in Silver Springs, Maryland, working on a mural, and I was able to get the mural done fairly quickly. It came together in like within that 24-hour period, one day, really. And and it was very interesting because while I'm working and I'm doing this for my patron, right, who I'm very thankful for. So I did it for my patron. So of course, I'm getting that check, and that check is helping out. I'm also using that opportunity to push what I'm able to do a step further. So now I'm integrating a different kind of paint, using spray paint a little bit more. I'm looking at other artwork that's sort of been, you know, I'm looking at street art. I'm looking at like abstract art, and actually figuring out how all of that sort of is can push my thing a little further. You know what I mean? And trying it. Of course, you can experiment to an extent. Like you don't want to go some things are a little more rigid. Like when you work for, say, some projects, you have like a rigid parameter you have to stick with. Like, say you're working for a mural, they want the mural that they sort of finally agree to. You know what I mean? You're working with a like a neighborhood project or something like that. But then you'll find other projects where you have a little more leeway. You you can be a more creative with what you're doing. So that's one way that I use to sort of push me further. But at the same time, doing it like in another thing that I've started to do. Hopefully, I'm not doing too wordy with this. Um, when I teach, I create a form of teaching. So when I create, like say I'm doing a drawing class, like I'm teaching. I am teaching. I'm just completing a 10-week drawing class Fleischer tomorrow actually. So what I'll do is in a course of teaching the class, I'll create while I'm teaching. So I'll use this as an opportunity to say, take my book out, like my sketchbook. So since I'm teaching a class in urban sketching, I'll create this sort of urban, you know, sketch. So I found that doing that forces me to continually generate new pieces of artwork while at the same time I'm educating people in the kind of artwork that I'm making. So I found that it was a very useful tool. Nobody told me to do that. I just figured out myself. I'll do it, and a lot of times that's not the way I've been taught. Usually, by the time you're in the teacher capacity, everything you would show, you would talk about your work. Maybe once you'll bring it in, or you'll show slides or something like this. But making that your viewpoint towards what art is a living thing, I've found has been very useful in helping me, fuel myself with energy. Because sometimes, to be honest, you got this, you got that, you got kids, and you have children. It's like responsibilities and this and that. It's hard to find that time to just make some work. You know, you know what I mean? And it used to be more of an issue when I would keep it separate, but by creating the work, that's really helped me out. Hopefully, that's
Yeah, that was my next question. Like, I know you have a family. I know you're holding it down. As an artist myself, I spend time making art. I don't always spend time making money making art, or I should say that my art doesn't always make me money, but I'm trying to do the best at creating a body of work and putting, due diligence into when I make the time, I use the time. And my kids are grown now, and so I aside from my spouse and the dogs and the cat, like, I'm not running around to soccer practice or play practice or anything else. And yet I occasionally still find myself overwhelmed with where's the time to create art, because I'm one of those 9 to 5ers who has a day job that isn't necessarily I mean, I use my creativity within my job, but it's not an art job, right? So I spend my art making time outside of my work hours. So what how do you find your balance, especially given the fact that you are in an art employment sense? Like, you teach art, you make art. How does that work for you?
well. I mean, it works out. It works out for me. I mean, um, I've found that um, in creating, like sometimes it's like the when the motivation isn't there. Because sometimes you'll find like I found it like when the motivation will not like necessarily be there to create work. You're tired, right? Um, really making it your like obliging yourself to spend a set amount of time creating stuff, um even if it's just or in your creative space, I think becomes important. Like sometimes I'll go and I'll just sit and I'll sit with the work in front of me and I'll say, like, you know what, I may be tired, I may be sort of, I can't really, I just need to look at the work. Put the work in front of you. That was something I got from John Dow, who teaches printmaking. He's a brilliant artist, and he was a printmaker at Tyler. And I remember him saying, like, having work where you have to interact with it, and then also having that time that's like designated is, I think, is important. Having time where you sit and you look at the work, and this is dedicated. Even if I don't lift the pencil up, this is my time to sit and contemplate the work. It was also suggested recently by another artist. that because he was talking about we were talking about a third separate artist, Richard Watson. Now we had the conversation, and he said like one day he spends in the business of art, and one day like aside from studio stuff, he has a day where he spends in the business of art. Like you know what I mean? Like just I'm not going to paint. I'm not going to paint. It was just it was funny because it just said like you have a time that you dedicate to creating art, but then you have another day you spend in the business of art, and I have to get better with that, you know, because there's another side of this thing that some people engage in very well, and for the creative people is it's very hard to do, and that is um finding the resources that allow you to create the work, and that needs to be some time needs to be dedicated, more time needs to be dedicated to that. um but because for instance, when I came out of high school, I had this perception that all you did was you create good work and then people will find you, and those people will scholarships, and those scholarships will help you go to college, much like football and basketball players. There are no recruiters for art.
Right, right.
For art, but what there are grants and opportunities and arts organizations and stuff out there who would love to hear your voice, but you have to connect with them. So that is the other part of it that I think at times we need to get engaged in, because in doing so, you create the opportunities to show your work, create more work, network with more people, stuff like that. So yeah, so that's something I think we all should have. We should dedicate some time to just the connections, the business of art. Plenty of art books, and online opportunities. Like they'll have online things that tell you when they're having certain gatherings, several meetings. Several meetings. Like I know in South Jersey, they have the South Jersey Cultural Alliance and stuff like that, and they'll have meetings and stuff in Philadelphia, which is like a treasure trove of art opportunities. You can go and you can find out. You say, oh, I might want to do something with Taller or Puerto Rican. I might want to do something with the Asian arts, collective. You might want to do something with, you know, um, the Fringe Festival. You know, an artist, poet. So, but in order to connect with those, you sort of have to interact with that. You got to sort of step out of your what do you call it, introverted, natural introverted art inclinations, and step into the greater world. Hello world, I create art. This is why you should give it in.
I mean, that's why I used to love going to the October Gallery because it was a both and, right? Like we would get to hear poets, sometimes new poets that never heard before, and obviously the usual suspects who'd grown into the community
Mhm,
and hearing what they were bringing, this week, right? And getting inspired by that, but being around the art. And there were, I think, occasional times where the artist might have been in the room who had created certain pieces,
mhm,
but a lot of times it was art hanging
mhm,
and you saw a name, you might have known the person or heard of the person, but there's another artist and there's another artist who's got their art here on the wall. And just being surrounded by creative people of all kinds is, as with the pandemic being a thing that has challenged both in-person opportunities for networking,
mhm.
learning, um, and working collaboratively. I feel like we're heading out of that, and I'm wondering how you feel about the how the pandemic has impacted you and your ability to create art and be with other artists that might be inspiring you or might be inspired.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the very peculiar thing about the pandemic. In a one sense, it created separation, but in another sense, it broke the barriers of time and space and enabled us to interact with each other through the digital space. Like you and I, like you're in Philly right now, and I'm in New Jersey, but we're still interacting. And before, that seemed like a daunting task, like something that. But we had to do it so much by necessity that now it's like, oh, I could do it. I was able to do poetry readings with people who were like poet laureates from San Diego, San Francisco, what I mean, and there were people from Alaska, people from down south, from South Carolina, North Carolina, and they would create these digital spaces where we can interact, um, to sort of be a supplement for what we couldn't do in physical interaction. you know some people I've met, and this is crazy in my mind, because I met people who have passed, like who I met in that digital space, who passed. One man, Charmello, he's the one who did he did the production for Busta Rhymes. If you really want to party to me, put your hands up in the sky. But he was also a spoken word poet, you know and he we got on, and we all and we were able to interact. Unfortunately, time took him away. you know uh he was taken away. He got sick, I guess. It wasn't anything but violent, but yeah. So yeah. And but as far as for it did impact me as an artist, because you had stuff, you had shows. I mean, I had work up at several places that wound up there for like months, and just hanging in this space, and people really couldn't see it, right? Because I also exhibit work, um, and then also, like, interacting with people. Those physical interactions lead to those financial transactions. So, so you know, so that sort of affected that as well. But things have picked up in some respects. Even teaching, like, and I do not fault. I did some online teaching. It's not quite the same, and it's just, but it's totally different. Um, but it doesn't. I don't think it's any replacement for that physical interaction you have when you see the work in the classroom. But I did realize that digital teaching is a possibility. Um, so that opens the door for sharing information with a whole new group of people. Young people young people who are out of state, people who are homeschooled. You know what I mean? People who have disabilities and can't go, or people who are immune compromised. Like, you might find out that you have COVID, but if it's a class where you can take a digital drawing class, you can do a digital drawing class. Because you're not in the physical space of someone else. You know what I mean? Um, Hopefully, we'll find a way to do more hybrid situations like that, where we can service people who need to be served despite time and space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, as we wrap this up, I want to hear from you, like what kind of tidbits you might have to share, tidbits of wisdom, insights that you may have as an artist who's been around the block a bit, for aspiring artists. And I think particularly, like we were just talking about earlier, the whole idea of just getting out there and doing it. Like, what can you tell folks who are maybe sitting on the fence and trying to figure out what's the next thing for them to do? What advice do you have to offer to folks?
Express yourself. Um, well, I didn't write this down, but I guess if we do this again, I'll write it down, but so I can make it real crystal clear. But um, um, express yourself. If you feel it, if it's inside of you and you need it to come out, express yourself. Write it, paint it, draw it, sculpt it, dance it, sing it. Get it out of yourself. And if you really feel connected with it, learn about it. Learn about it. Go to a neighborhood. They have. It doesn't have to be on a college level. I mean, at Fleischer, everybody is just doing it for the love. There's no grades or anything like that. Same with Perkins Center for the Arts in South Jersey. I'm working with Perkins Center for the Arts in Collingswood, so I teach drawing class like 10 to 1 on Tuesdays and on Mondays and Thursdays. So I'm teaching one this Thursday called we're calling it a funkadelic figure drawing class. Yeah, funkadelic figure drawing. So that should be very interesting. Um, but yeah, so that's the second thing. Like, so one, express it, express it. If you really you feel like there's nothing stopping you, make that painting, make your painting, make the drawing, write that poem, whatever, write that play, whatever you want to do. And then two, learn about what you're doing. So once you've tried it, figure out what you can learn to elevate what you're doing, right? Not for grade's sake or not for your own edification and growth. Learn about it. And then
Mm-hmm.
three, go see examples or hear examples of what you like, what you want to do. See it. If you're good, you want to write a play, go see a play. You want to write a play, go read a play. You know what I mean? Participate in the play,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you want to, if you like
Mm-hmm.
painting, if you really like painting, go to the museum and see some paintings. It's free on Sundays. you know,
Right.
go see,
Right.
go see
Right.
it, go see it. And and then and I guess the fourth thing would be once you've decided that this is going to be the thing that you're going to do, re up on the supplies that you'll need. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a writer, you need to be able to write. Maybe this is time to get that laptop. Maybe you can get a used laptop, right? You can borrow one from
Right.
places. If you want to be a sculptor, you're gonna need some clay. If you're gonna be a painter, you're gonna need some paint. If you're gonna be an animator, you know what you're gonna need. You're gonna need some. So you're gonna know how. You're gonna need the equipment to do the thing that you want to do. And then
Right.
I think the most important thing to add on top of all of that, enjoy it. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. Thank God for the inspiration. Thank God for the motivation. Just dig into it and enjoy it. Do it. Laugh out loud if you can with it. Cry out loud if you need to
Mm-hmm.
cry. But just get into it and let that be your thing. And feel pride in the thing that you're going to do. And then the more you do it, the more it will take you to the places where you want to go, even if those places are uh not the Oscars, even if those Oscars, right?
Right.
Even if those places are not like even if those places are not necessarily in an art gallery. I met an 80-year-old woman who learned how to paint from Bob Ross, and
Mm.
she was so inspiring to me because her paintings were like very simple, but she loved what she was doing, man. I was like, that's what it's all about. you know, and I try and hold a little bit of that love for myself. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, that's amazing. That's great. Great advice. Um, where can people see your work?
you can see my work. I have some work that's going to be shown at the Arts Garage at Stockton University,
Mm-hmm.
and you can look at my work on Instagram. Nard Pics, NARDPICS. Instagram. I've been doing reels a lot lately, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
You combine your music, you combine your favorite music with some of your visual arts. That's a good opportunity to see my stuff on Nard Pics, and and check me out on Facebook. I'm still on Facebook. You can. I have to say that now, or was it the metaverse, or what it's called now?
Right. Right. For as long as it lasts, right?
Or whatever, for long as it lasts. But I post a lot of visual art online to those places. So hopefully it tricks the algorithm. I say if it's only art, what can you do? you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So I post a lot of art online so you can see that. And I show in Philadelphia, I show in out here in South Jersey, when the opportunities come. And I usually put some information up about that. And I will be at Perkins Center for the Arts, right? teaching
Hmm.
drawing classes, and check me out at Fleischer Art Memorial at 8th and Catherine in South Philly. I teach there pretty much weekly for workshops and things like that.
Well, thank you, brother. I really appreciate your time. We go way back, and I hope to bring you on here again in the future. As we continue to move forward. My whole purpose for putting together this podcast was similar to what we've been talking about. Just get out there and do it. And I really want to be able to create a community of art-minded people, creative-minded people who can learn from each other and can learn from listening to others. And I do have a goal of, in the future, maybe a year from now, be in a live event where we're doing some real live trainings and learnings and networking with other artists so that we can continue to build the community and build this sort of momentum towards you can do it, and have inspiring folks like you in the room to help give that message. So thank you.
Yeah, that's you got me, man. You're definitely one of the coolest brothers that I know as I chill in your hometown of Lawnside.
Solid.
and 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 I appreciate you involving me in this, and look forward to seeing you face to face again.
Let's break some bread soon.
Let's break bread soon. All right. God bless you, brother.
All right. Peace and love.
Peace and love, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Pardon My Art podcast. I hope that you learned something or were inspired by something that our guest had to say. Our goal is to build one of the largest networks of artists with the simple motto of each one, teach one. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to my Patreon page at patreon.com/Oscar, and Oscar is spelled with a K. Well, that's all for now. Stay tuned for more interesting conversations with artists who are ready to share their amazing stories and inspire you to create your own. Be good to yourself and do great things.